Continuing the Maimer Chayav Inish Libsumi B'Puria that the Rebbe said on Purim, by the Purim Fabrengen Tafshin Yud Ches 5718-1958. To give a quick overview of what we learned, that the idea of Purim and the Yom Tov of Purim is the concept of something and a space in which Arur, Haman and Baruch Mordechai are equal, and yet Hashem decides to transform and to take the same tree that's 50 amas high, upon which Haman wanted to hang Mordechai, and instead hang Haman himself on it, and to take the house of Haman and give it over to Mordechai. And that's why the fulfillment of the mitzvah of Purim is also that a person reaches such a space of Ad Lo Yada, of beyond knowledge, and yet it remains that Haman is cursed and Mordechai is blessed. And the Rebbe explains it by explaining the idea of the tree that Haman wanted to make in order to hang Mordechai on it. And Hashem said this tree will not happen, because Avraham already came and he planted the Eshel in Beersheba. Avraham planted a tree in Beersheba, and likewise the tree that Moshe Rabbeinu had in the Midbar, and the Rebbe explains it's the same tree because Yaakov took from the branches of Avram's tree. He planted the cedar trees, which they used to build the krashim, the beams for the Mishkan, and specifically the middle pole that held the krashim together, which goes from one end to another, is the one which is corresponding to Yaakov Avinu. And this, it says in the Medrash, went around like a snake, because it turned around from one side to the other, and this is what got rid of the snake of Haman. Not just got rid of the snake, Misheresh Petza Yetzei Tzefa, from the Nachash HaKadmoni. That's where Haman came, and it was transformed as a result of this. Why is it? Because of the Eshel of Avraham Avinu, and even more what's brought out by Yaakov Avinu. What's the Eshel of Avraham Avinu? Hashem puts Avraham Avinu in this world, which is Gan Eden, and He adds to it something that's higher than Gan Eden itself. In Gan Eden, there's only Gan Eden godliness, which is connected to the world. He brings from Eden, from the godliness that's above the world. And that's all brought out in the Eshel. Eshel is 3 letters, Aleph, Shin, Lamed, starting from the Aleph. And in explaining the Aleph, the Rebbe explained that for 26 generations the Aleph complained. Why was the world not created with me? I'm the first one of the letters of the Aleph base. Until finally Hashem said, when the Torah will be given, I'll give it with you. Anoichi Hashem Elokecha. So Brias Ha'olam, Bereshis, the creation of the world, was with a base. And the explanation of why this is because the base is what relates to the world, what the world is able to relate to, whereas the Aleph is above the world. And the question was, if the Aleph is above the world, how can the Torah be given with the Aleph? And similarly, how can Avraham Avinu bring into Gan Eden something that's above Gan Eden? And so in order to explain this, the Rebbe began by explaining how it is in a person. In a person, there is the concept of the Aleph is A'alfech Chachma, A'alfech Bina, meaning that the Aleph is above Chachma and Bina, wisdom and understanding, and it teaches, it draws down into the wisdom and understanding. What is that in a person? In a person, that's the power of will. A person has intellect, understanding, that's the beginning of the person. That's what a person relates to, that's what comes in internally in the person. He can understand it and decide based on understandable reasons, based on intellectual decisions, what to do and how to do it. Then there's Ratzon, the will, the desire, what a person wants. When a person wants something, it's above understanding. He wants it because he wants it. There's no intellectual explanation. As we say, Ein Tam L'Ratzon. Yet the Rebbe explains that it's not possible to say that there's no time, there's no reason whatsoever for Ratzin, because a person in the end of the day is a human being that's controlled by intellect. And what does it mean, Ein Tam L'Ratzin, that it's not an intellectual reason, rather it's a tam, a reason of taste. of yishmak, of tainug, of pleasure, that the reason that causes the ratzin is deeper than regular intellect. It's above regular intellect, but it's what we call a tam kamus. It's a hidden reason. There's still something there that causes it to happen. And this is the idea that when a person starts with ratzin, plain ratzin, he wants it, and he doesn't have in that desire that he has, he doesn't feel the inner and the deeper reason. The deeper reason meaning the pleasure that it's about. Then he still hasn't reached the ultimate of what it really is. Because ultimately, when there's a ratzin, it still could relate, and it still could come down into intellect, because ultimately it comes from something which is the pleasure that the person feels. Or the hidden pleasure, the tam kamus, that's not felt. And that's the idea of tam l'ratzin. And now how does that, and this is also why in a person, even his will can change. If a will is just something which is above reason, how could it change? There was no reason for it. Why is it now one way and now another way? But because once the hidden reason becomes revealed and comes out, then the hidden reason, which is the gishmak, the tam, can also is changeable, because in the end of the day, it's still something which is internal and part of the person. In a similar fashion in Avodah, we had the idea of ganva pum achtarta rachmane karya, which is that a thief, even when he's stealing, even when he's breaking into a house, he davens to Hashem, because he has this realization that Hashem is the one running the world. And not only that, but Hashem can help him, even when naturally there's no under explanation of why he should be helped. But Hashem can help him that he should be saved, that he should be successful in his crime, in his theft that he's perpetrating. If, however, the person would think about it for a second, here it's Hashem that's helping me. Here it's Hashem that's helping me even in a supernatural way, that I should be successful. So if that's the case, why would I want to do it in a way that's against Hashem? Why don't I just do something in a manner that Hashem wants it? Why don't I just try and earn my livelihood in a proper way, in a legal way, the way Hashem wants it? But that's because he hasn't really contemplated and internalized the fact that he's just davening because that's the way it is. But he didn't internalize and bring it into him so that it should actually affect him. That's similar to the concept of what we spoke about the Ratzin. Meaning, he knows above understanding that Hashem is actually the one who's running the world, but he hasn't internalized it, he hasn't brought it down so that it should actually affect his life. It's the same thing also in a deeper sense, in a higher sense, that there's something called the Ratzu, which is the yearning, that a person yearns and desires to connect to Hashem. He wants to connect to the essence of Hashem, but as a result, his soul leaves his body. Or even in a simpler sense, he doesn't really feel how this is going to affect him in the practical manner. And as we see a lot of times, a person can get excited and inspired in special times, and yet the inspiration doesn't last. That's the idea similar to Ratzain, the will, which is the Ratzu, the yearning for Hashem, the great inspiration, but it's something that doesn't affect the internal and the practical life that the person lives. Similar to what we see in the Gemara about the Arba Shnichnisu LaPardes. The 4 people went into the Pardes, which is they went into the orchard, so to speak, meaning the secrets of godliness. Ben Azai was one who hates its umeis. He saw the greatness of Hashem. He had such a great yearning as a result of seeing the greatness of Hashem that his soul couldn't return to his body. And about this we say, Yakar be'enei Hashem amav salachsidav, it's precious in the hands of Hashem, or it's tough in the hands of Hashem when his chasidim, those who are close to him, when they pass away, meaning that he had this amazing yearning, but he didn't perfect it. He didn't accomplish the mission for which his soul came down to this world, which is to remain in the world. Similar to the two sons of Aaron. They came close to Hashem. They died. Their souls left their body. And yet Rabbi Akiva was able to, and that's the ratzon, the will, which is higher than understanding, higher than intellect, meaning it's not able to come down and be drawn down and internalized into something internal, into intellect. Rabbi Akiva, however, was nichnas b'shalom and yatsa b'shalom. He went in peace and he went out in peace. And the question is, why did he have to go in peace? Everybody went in peace. The fact, the greatness of Rabbi Akiva is that he was able to go out in peace as well. But the explanation is that even when he went in, even when he had this ratzon, this will, this ratzah, this yearning of tayu, of something which is above this world, he felt in it the inner, real reality of what it's really all about, which is the purpose and the goal, and therefore was b'shalom, peace. Peace being the name of Hashem, peace being the connection of higher, spiritual and physical. He felt something, the higher reality of what it really is. And therefore he was able to also go out in peace. Because since he, even in his ratzon, even in his will and his yearning to connect to Hashem, he still felt the ultimate, that even when he went above the limitation of the vessels that are able to contain, yet even there was still the connection to Hashem. Now that's the idea of a person who, even in his supernatural, even in his spiritual highest level, which is above the world, he still isn't leaving the ultimate purpose, which is to be connected to Hashem. Now this is the meaning of the Aleph. The Aleph, which is Pele, as we mentioned. It's a wonder. It's above the world. It's above understanding. Not just a question, but it's beyond understanding. It's a wonder. And yet, it's Aleph Chachma, Aleph Chabina. It teaches and it's drawn down into Chachma and Bina because inside it's felt the Tam Kamas, the hidden reason, which is the real pleasure of what it's all about. And that's also why we say that the Aleph of the Torah was able to be given with the Aleph of Anochi. The creation of the world couldn't be with an Aleph. Because it's too high, it's above the world. Not only is it too high, it's above the world. It negates the world. It negates the ability of creation because it's something that's above limits, above being contained in any type of practical, containable fashion manner. And yet, when the Torah was given through the Torah and mitzvahs, the whole point of Torah and mitzvahs is to reveal the inner, the tam kamos, the pnimius sarat, and the inner will of Hashem, the pleasure of Hashem in the world, which is in Torah and mitzvahs, which is in the physical world, in the practical drawing it down into the world. So thus, when the Torah is given with an Aleph, the Aleph is actually able to come and create the pleasure of Hashem, which the pleasure of Hashem is to come down into the world. So it doesn't remain makif, it doesn't remain higher than the world, above the world, but rather it's something which comes down into the world and becomes part of the world. And this is also why we say that in the beginning of the world, it says, Oyer v'choshech, light and darkness were equal. They were together. One couldn't differentiate between one and the other to the extent that the Medrash tells us, Ein yoidea be'ezem hem chafetz. We don't know which one Hashem's inner desire and will was, whether it's in the actions of tzaddikim or the actions of Rishaim. Since it says, Vayara likim esa'or ki tov, Hashem saw the light, that it's good, so we see, have a oimer that what Hashem desires is the deeds, the actions of tzaddikim. What does that mean? How is it possible that Hashem should desire and wish for the actions of tzaddikim, of Rishaim? But we're talking before the creation of light, before there was the idea of the world of tikkun. It's a world which is above the internal reality. It's ratzon, it's will. Will isn't bound by the laws of intellect. It's not bound by any limitation. So therefore there's no difference between good and bad. We don't know where his chayfetz, his ratzon, his desire is. It could be in this, it could be in that. There's no clear indication to where it goes. And as such, that's why there's the Aleph and the Beis, which Aleph is the letters of Arur, cursed, which from that there can come also Arur Haman or Arur Kenan, the curse of Klippa, the evils of Klippa, that comes from the Aleph, and Beis is Baruch, blessed. The world to be Baruch, the word Baruch is also from the word Havrach, Hamshacha, drawing down. The world can only be drawn down into Baruch, where there's the blessings, the things which are good, which are the way Hashem wants it. But in the essence that's before creation, you don't see a separation, you don't see a difference, you don't see which one is greater because they're both equal. However, when it comes to Oir, light, which is the light of Torah, Torah reveals the inner will of Hashem. The Tam Kamos, the hidden reason, the inner will of Hashem. How in the Tam, in the reason itself, the essence, and the reality is the Einig, the pleasure of Hashem, which is the Nachas Ruach of Hashem, and the fact that there's a creation of a world, and the fact that there's Maseim Shel Tzadikim, the actions of Tzadikim in this world. Now, since the Torah reveals this, since the Torah reveals the hidden reason, the Einig, the pleasure that's in the creation and the reality of the world, so now it's able to be that even in the outer will of Hashem, even in the place where Aleph and Beis are equal, even in the Aleph, in the place of Arur, even over there you're able to see that the inner essence of that outer will, of that light which is above the world, its essence is the physical world which does what Hashem wants. That's why the beginning of Matan Torah starts with Anoichi Havaya Lekecha. From this Aleph which is Anoichi. Anoichi is Ani with a kaf for Keser. Keser is like the crown on a person's head, and similarly the crown in the Sfiris is the power of Ratzin, of will. But there's the Chitzonius Keser, which is only Ratzin, will, which doesn't express the pleasure, but the Pnimius, the inner essence of it, is really the pleasure of Hashem. And that's why we say that the Anoichi comes down to Havaya. Havaya is the 4 letters of Hashem's name, which show on Tzimtzum, Hispashtos, Hamshacha, and Hispashtos, which means the way the godly light comes into the world. But the way it's constantly, the Yud shows that it's a constant thing that happens, that every single moment Hashem makes the world exist in that manner where the light is condensed and spreads and comes and is drawn into the world. And that's why Matan Torah is that the Anoichi, the Aleph of Anoichi, the Keser, the essence of Hashem which is above the world, is able to be drawn down into the Tzimtzum, into the Shem Havaya, the 4 letters of Hashem's name, where the light is condensed and drawn down into the world, and in a manner that it remains, that even then it still remains Ani Havaya Lo Shonisi, that there's no change as a result. But rather that the very essence of the godly light comes into the world in an unchanging manner. Why? Because the inner purpose of it is Elokecha, to be the power and the sustenance of a Jew. That in the place where there's darkness, in the place where there's able to be Chayshech, where there's able to be Maseim Shel Rishayim, it should be felt that the inner will of Hashem is for the actions of Tzaddikim. And that's why all of that happens specifically through Isarus L'Tata, through the arousal from below, which is the avodah of a Jew, of learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, because that's the ultimate purpose. Where can that higher light of Hashem be revealed in the world, specifically as a result of a person revealing in this physical world through the Torah and mitzvahs, which the Torah and mitzvahs is the inner desire and the inner will of Hashem, bringing it down so it should be internalized in the world. And that's the aleph of the Eshel of Avraham Avinu, that Gan Eden itself, which even though it's a limited place, in it there should be able to be, through Avodah, through Torah and Mitzvah, through a Jew doing actions in this world, he's able to reveal the inner desire of Hashem, which is even higher than the limitations of Gan Eden itself.